Welcome to the debate. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the catastrophic event at the Aretia hatching grounds. And before we jump in, we want to dedicate this discussion to Savage at Thulamela, along with Hellion and Sarge.
Yes, absolutely. Big shout out to you guys.
So to set the stage here, the official human historical record tells a remarkably simple, cleanly packaged story about Aretia.
Too clean, really.
Right. A human writer, Xaden Ryerson, is officially blamed for the murder of 3 dragon elders, 4 riders, and the disappearance of 6 dragon eggs.
Which, if you understand literally anything about the rigid mechanics of dragon law and autonomy, makes absolutely 0 sense.
Exactly.
The humans are strictly forbidden from Empyrean politics. They do not have the access, the physical power, or, frankly, the jurisdictional authority to pull off an operation of that scale, especially one involving the innermost sanctum of dragon reproduction.
Yeah, it's just physically impossible for a single human rider.
Right. So we have to look past the official human record. We have to look at the physical evidence and the dragon psychology. What really happened to those 6 eggs?
And that brings us to the core of our disagreement today. So I argue for what we can call the covenant. I believe the Empyrean leadership strategically and peacefully entrusted 1 egg from each of the 6 breeds to the Idris Andarna's kind for safeguarding.
Okay, but
It was a highly classified Empyrean-sanctioned relocation. They moved them to a sanctuary beyond the reach of magic, completely bypassing human knowledge.
And I argue for the theft. I look at the evidence in that valley and I do not see, a peaceful diplomatic handover. I see the Irids acting as radical, violent secessionists.
Violent? That's a strong word for...
They orchestrated a bloody coup. They stole the next generation of dragons to raise them far away from the continent's corrupted, weaponized culture of human bonding.
Well, to really unpack this, we need to start with the biological imperative of dragons. Their primary directive, above all politics, is the survival of their hatchlings.
Obviously.
Right. And if we look at the historical text, the original Empyrean was formed over 600 years ago for one specific mechanical purpose, which was to protect the hatching grounds from venin.
True.
They didn't bond humans out of, a desire for companionship. They bonded humans because dragons lack the opposable thumbs required to physically weave wards. It was a calculated survival strategy. And fast forward to today, we see exactly 6 eggs missing.
Right. It's not a random clutch.
Exactly. Not a disorganized grab in the dark. Exactly 1 representing each of the 6 known breeds. That precision is the fingerprint of a genetic arc. It is way too deliberate to be a mere smash-and-grab theft. It's a calculated conservation strategy designed to preserve the entire spectrum of their species.
Okay. The selection of those specific eggs is deliberate, yes, I'll give you that. But taking 1 of each breed is also the perfect way to establish a total monopoly on the future of the species.
A monopoly?
Yeah, it's leverage. If the Irids want to force the Empyrean to submit to their isolationist ideology, holding the genetic legacy of all 6 breeds is the ultimate hostage situation.
I think you're projecting human malice onto it.
No, I'm just looking at the facts. You hold the future of every single den in your talons. But let's move away from intent for a second and look at the physical reality of the crime scene. We have to talk about the bodies in the valley.
Look, the violence is the hardest part to reconcile. I acknowledge that.
It's not just hard to reconcile, it completely invalidates the idea of a peaceful covenant. We aren't talking about eggs quietly disappearing in the night here. We are looking at a massacre.
Well,
3 dragon elders, 4 human riders, and their bonded dragons were violently murdered. Let's drill down into what an elder actually is in dragon society.
they have the highest authority.
Right. It's not just about surviving for a long time. Elder status is the culmination of centuries of accumulated power, territorial dominance, and tactical wisdom. The Empyrean's entire governance structure relies on an absolute deference to age to maintain order among apex predators.
True. Deference is the glue of their society.
Exactly. So if this was a sanctioned plan, if the Empyrean collectively agreed to hand these eggs over, Why the slaughter? You don't butcher your own leadership to execute a democratically agreed-upon conservation plan.
But you're assuming...
Furthermore, if you remove 3 elders simultaneously, you don't just have a tragedy, you create a massive, destabilizing power vacuum. The physical reality of killing 3 elders requires a level of coordinated, overwhelming force that absolutely screams of a hostile, unauthorized coup by the Irids.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of what you're suggesting. You are assuming the violence was committed by the Irids against a unified Empyrean.
Because that's what the evidence points to.
But what if the Empyrean isn't unified? What if the violence was the Empyrean silencing a dissenting faction of its own elders?
Wait, you think the Empyrean sanctioned the assassination of its own elders?
I think we are dealing with an extinction-level threat. When the survival of a species is on the line, the standard rules of societal deference fracture.
Oh, come on, that's a massive leap.
Is it? Terran has already mentioned that the Empyrean is deeply split on whether to get involved in the human wars. It stands to reason they are fundamentally fractured on how to protect the eggs, too.
But murdering them?
The Covenant theory doesn't require zero violence. It requires that the overarching governing body, or at least a dominant, pragmatic faction of it, sanction the removal of the eggs. The elders who died might have been the ones who discovered the plan and tried to physically stop it, acting against the survival mandate.
That requires assuming the Empyrean operates like some kind of human covert ops agency.
Then let's look at the actual human covert operations happening around this event. Because if this was just a chaotic dragon civil war, the human evidence wouldn't look the way it does. The scene was deliberately orchestrated to frame the humans, specifically Xaden, to ensure Navarre and Aretia wouldn't realize the dragons were secretly evacuating their own young.
They blamed him because he was there and he's an easy target.
Now, look at the specific details we have. Xaden left a very specific note for Violet, and he didn't just scrawl it on a piece of scrap paper. He wrote it on their marriage document. He wrote, "Don't look for me. It's yours now."
Which is a legally binding transfer of assets and authority?
Exactly. Why that document? In Navarrian culture, the marriage contract is the ultimate symbol of bound fates. By writing "it's yours now" on that specific parchment, he is legally and symbolically severing their combined status.
Right.
He is taking the entirety of the blame and isolating her from the fallout. He's acting as a firewall. If this were just a chaotic dragon civil war, Xaden wouldn't have the presence of mind or the need to legally insulate Violet from Empyrean blowback.
Right.
He's actively participating in the cover-up of a sanctioned operation that humans are forbidden to interfere with.
Oris, and hear me out. He's just a man who knows he's about to be executed for a disaster he was caught in the middle of, and he's leaving his affairs in order. A man facing the firing squad doesn't prove a grand dragon conspiracy. It just proves he knows he's the fall guy.
It's too specific, though.
But if we're talking about covering things up, we have to talk about Imogen and the memory wipe. Because that is the most damning piece of human evidence we have.
Yes, Imogen wiped 12 hours of Violet's memory. And the critical detail here, the detail that changes the entire context, is that Imogen didn't do it maliciously to silence Violet.
She wiped her mind.
But when Violet questioned her, Imogen stated clearly what you asked me to. Violet requested the memory wipe.
Let's pause and think about the psychological mechanism of that for a second. Violet is a scribe. A scribe's fundamental identity, their entire psychological architecture, is built on the preservation of truth, no matter how ugly or uncomfortable it is. They are archivists.
Right. Which makes her request even more significant.
Exactly. For someone with that specific psychological profile, to actively choose to permanently delete 12 hours of historical truth from her own mind, the reality of what she witnessed must have been an absolute existential trauma.
Precisely. She saw the Covenant. She saw the dragons, the supposed protectors of humanity, secretly packing up their future and abandoning the human race.
That wouldn't make her wipe her own memory.
Yes, it would. She realized that holding that knowledge was too dangerous. If Navarrian leadership found out that the Empyrean was evacuating its young, they would turn on the dragons immediately. The alliance would shatter overnight. Erasing her memory was a desperate, tactical measure by a human who realized she had stumbled into a dragon operation that would unravel the entire war effort if exposed.
The problem with that theory is that it assumes Violet was protecting a peaceful evacuation. I look at that exact same psychological trauma and see a completely different trigger.
Which is?
She didn't ask for a memory wipe because she saw a peaceful retreat. She asked for it because she witnessed a horrific, brutal dragon civil war. She saw the Irids slaughtering elders. She saw that the united, invincible front of the Empyrean is a complete lie.
But if Navarre learns the dragons are actively murdering each other over ideology, the human defense grid collapses out of sheer panic. She erased the memory because the reality of the theft means the dragons are broken, and the war is already lost.
You keep framing the Irids as these violent disruptors, but we need to look at what they are actually disrupting.
They are disrupting the alliance. Let's look closely at the psychology of the Irids, because their ideology is the smoking gun here.
Okay.
When Andarna reveals to the Irids that she is bonded to a human, they aren't diplomatic, they are horrified. The Irid male explicitly tells her, bonds are merely magical ties. You are Irid. You are magic. Bend it, shape it, break it as you see fit.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that statement, though.
It is a statement of absolute, unyielding supremacy. The Irids do not view the human-dragon bond as a symbiotic partnership. They view it as a parasite. They see bonded dragons as slaves to a lesser, corrupted species.
Well, slaves is a bit hyperbolic.
Is it? They don't respect the bond, and they certainly don't respect the Empyrean's choice to maintain it. If you believe your entire race is being subjugated and led to the slaughter by human politics and failing wards, you don't politely ask for permission to save the next generation. You take them by force. The Irids' absolute contempt for human bonds gives them the perfect radical motive to steal the eggs and permanently break the cycle of weaponization.
I agree that the Irids despise the bond. Their contempt is obvious. But you are assuming the Empyrean still defends the bond.
Are they not bonded?
What if the Empyrean has come to the exact same conclusion as the Irids?
Wait, you are suggesting the Empyrean is intentionally dissolving the Rider program?
I am suggesting they are cutting their losses and hedging their bets. The Empyrean isn't blind. They see the physical reality of the continent. Navarrian leadership is corrupt, the human-woven wards are actively failing, and the Venin are multiplying exponentially.
Right, but
The Rider program was designed as a defense mechanism, but it has become a massive, catastrophic liability.
a liability how? The dragons still need the humans to maintain the wards.
Because the mechanics of the Venin threat demand a change in strategy, Venin drain magic from the Earth and from dragons. If the wards fail completely, which seems totally inevitable at this point, every single bonded dragon and every single egg on the continent becomes easily accessible fuel for the enemy.
So they just give up?
Entrusting the eggs to the Irids isn't a surrender to radicals. It's the Empyrean recognizing that the Irids' anti-bond philosophy is actually the ultimate protective measure right now. By fevering the next generation from humans, they ensure those hatchlings cannot be used, corrupted, or drained in a human-led war. It's a strategic evacuation utilizing the Irids' isolationism as a shield.
But look at the mechanism of this so-called shield. We keep talking about this destination as a sanctuary, but if the Irids despise humans and the modern Empyreans so deeply, they aren't just saving those eggs from venin, they're culturally reprogramming them.
It's survival.
We are assuming the eggs are safe, but they are being raised in a sensory deprivation tank of isolationist supremacy. They are raising an army of dragons who will never bond, who will view the continent as a failure, and who will likely view the remaining bonded dragons as enemies. We are confusing a strategic retreat with a hostile kidnapping.
But calling it a hostile kidnapping ignores the fundamental physics and logistics of the Venin threat. Let's look closely at how Venin actually operate. They channel from the Earth, they operate on a principle of magic consumption, they rely on a high-pressure magic environment to pull from.
Right. They need ambient magic to siphon.
Exactly. They function on a pressure gradient. To truly save dragonkind, the eggs must go where Venin physically cannot survive. Terran observes explicitly that there is no magic beyond the continent. It is why we dragons remain, why it is surprising the Irids left our shores.
Yeah. And there's a reason they remain.
The Irids didn't just leave for ideological reasons. They found a geographic loophole. An environment with absolutely zero magic acts as a biological clean room. Venin cannot push into a territory where there is no magic to sustain them. They would effectively starve.
Okay, but
A sanctioned covenant to move the eggs to this magicless zone is the only mathematically sound survival strategy against an enemy that consumes magic. The Empyrean knows this.
you're assuming that magicless zone is entirely safe for dragons, too. But that completely ignores the biological reality of the eggs themselves. You can't just put dragons into a clean room without oxygen,
Dragons breathe air, not magic.
but they require magic to sustain their physical mass and internal fire. The Veil isn't just a physical home, it is a thermal and magical incubator. Andarna herself says about the lands beyond, "I do not like this place. My kind would not settle here."
But the Arids did settle there. They adapted to the environment.
Because they are magic. The arid male explicitly says you are arid, you are magic. They generate their own internal supply. They are self-sustaining.
Right, so they can teach the hatchlings.
The other 6 breeds are not. You are talking about dropping a red daggertail or a black morningstar breeds that require immense ambient magic from the continent to incubate and thrive into an absolute vacuum. How do they survive?
It's a risk they have to take.
Taking those 6 eggs into a magicless void isn't a guaranteed sanctuary. It is a desperate, highly lethal physiological experiment, and it is one I cannot believe the elders would unanimously agree to subject their own young to.
It is a severe adaptation protocol, absolutely. But what is the alternative? Leave them in the Veil to be drained by venin when the wards inevitably collapse?
The alternative is that the elders didn't agree to it, which brings us right back to the bodies in the valley. You cannot have a peaceful covenant that leaves 3 elders dead. The Irids are powerful, yes, they are magic itself as they claim, but to overthrow 3 elders and wipe out 4 riders requires a level of sudden, coordinated violence that fundamentally breaks the social contract of the Empyrean.
I still maintain that the precision of the event, taking exactly 1 egg of each breed, points away from a chaotic rebellion.
If the Irids were just stealing to build their own numbers or create chaos, why carefully select a perfect genetic cross-section?
Because it's a hostage situation.
It represents the preservation of the species in its entirety. It is an arc.
Or, as we discussed, it is a calculated hostage situation. You take 1 of each breed, you hold the genetic future hostage, and you dictate the terms of the war to the Empyrean. I look at the Irids, and I see extremists.
Extremists can still be pragmatic. Breaking a bond takes on the dragon or the human. They care about ideological purity. The trail of dead elders, the massive power vacuum they created, and their explicit hostility toward human bonds proves this was a violent rogue theft by secessionists.
It is a terrifying prospect, I will admit. If you are correct, the dragons are fighting a war on 2 fronts, a physical war against the venin and an ideological civil war against their own ancient kin.
Exactly.
But I keep returning to the mechanics of the cover-up. The deliberate nature of the egg selection, the geographic brilliance of hiding them in a biological clean room where venin cannot reach, and the lengths humans went to, like Violet surgically erasing her own memory and Xaden legally sacrificing his freedom, all point to a tragic but necessary Empyrean-sanctioned covenant.
Well, I think where we fundamentally agree is that human riders are dangerously, almost pathetically ignorant of the mechanisms of dragon politics.
Oh, absolutely.
The arrogance of the Navarrian and Arethian leadership to look at a valley of dead elders, missing eggs, and a shattered power structure and just say, a human rider did this, is astounding.
It's ridiculous.
The official story blaming Xaden is a profound human misinterpretation of complex dragon affairs. Humans are entirely out of their depth.
That is a perfect point of convergence. The humans are merely reacting to the shockwaves of decisions made high above their heads, entirely blind to the physics and politics driving those decisions.
Yep.
But we do remain deadlocked on the core mechanism of this event. Was it a coordinated, desperate conservation effort by a pragmatic Empyrean utilizing a magicless quarantine zone, or a violent, bloody civil war initiated by radical secessionists leveraging the future of the species?
It is a question that completely redefines the power dynamic of this universe. Because, if the Irids are enemies of the Empyrean, the human riders have lost their greatest protectors and are caught in the crossfire of a civil war.
Right.
But if they are allies executing a covenant, the humans have already been left behind to face the venom alone.
It truly highlights how complex a fully autonomous, non-human political structure is. We are so used to looking at this world through the lens of human writers dictating the terms of engagement.
Always making it about themselves.
Exactly. But the reality is that the dragons are executing biological and tactical strategies that humans cannot even comprehend, let alone control.
And as long as the Empyrean remains silent on the matter, holding their secrets close to their chests in the veil, we are left to piece together the fragments of evidence, the memory wipes, the dead elders, and the physics of the magicless void that they leave behind.
We've tried to look closely at the mechanisms of destruction and preservation hidden within this event today. But until the Empyrean decides to speak, listeners must look to the skies, examine the evidence for themselves, and draw their own conclusions.